Hey everybody, um, thanks for coming back for episode 7 of my OCD blog, what it's like living with OCD, in particular Scrupulosity, and that's what this video is going to be focusing on a lot more than the others. I know I've touched on Scrupulosity in the past uh, several videos without really explaining too much what it really is. Um, Scrupulosity in most basic terms, is OCD with a religious theme. So someone like myself who uh, is Seventh-day Adventist Christian um, gets bombarded with um, intrusive thoughts that are disgusting, sinful, uh, morally reprehensible thoughts that I can't even begin to explain how horrific they are about God, Jesus, the Virgin Mary, the cross. And for most of my life, I felt so guilty. I felt so overwhelmed with sorrow and grief because I thought that I was really the one causing that. I felt that it was maybe some subconsciously how I really felt, and maybe that I didn't really love God, and it was it was heartbreaking, and it was the toughest thing to go through because it started when I was in 6th grade, and it's been going on since then, and I'm 34 now, and excuse me. I'm 34 now, and it still is something that's really tough to try to live through every day. Um, Even though I know as much about it as I do, I do research constantly and try and find out as much as I can any new information that there might be um, about this, because it seems that every time I go to a new psychiatrist and I say the word scrupulosity, they just get this dumbfounded look on their face, like they don't know what I'm talking about. And, excuse me, and I think I've said this before too, it's a little disheartening to know more about your condition than a trained psychiatrist does. But as for scrupulosity, um, it's not the most common form of OCD, but it is probably the most torturous form of OCD. There's feelings of absolute shame and absolute guilt that you can't shake, no matter how hard you try. For me, it's been constant prayer, constantly asking um, God to forgive me for having a thought that is not in keeping with Christian ways, that is not in keeping with the commandments, that is not something that would be acceptable in any standard. Um, for many people, the more I find out about scrupulosity, uh, the more I find out how many different types of problems it causes for people. Um, a lot of people are plagued with thoughts of incest or bestiality or pedophilia, and it's very important to understand whether you're watching this right now and you have those thoughts exactly, or you know somebody who does, it's very important to understand that that's not what you want. That's not what the person wants. That's the exact opposite of what they want. It it wraps itself around your mind, choking your mind, where you're gasping for breath because you so badly don't want to think these thoughts. You so badly don't want to feel that shame and that guilt and that disgust. And it seems like no matter how hard you try, the harder you try not to think about them, the more you pray to God to forgive you, the worse these thoughts get. And that's what OCD does. And it's um, it's really it's really weird to be able to sit here and to talk about it, knowing what it actually is, but still struggling with it myself, still not being able to break myself free from it. Um, you get into different modes with scrupulosity, with kind of a hyper morality type of thing where you feel, you feel responsible for um, making sure that you don't do anything that might be considered cheating somebody or stealing or um, something that is bad, something that is wrong, something that you shouldn't do. You also get a sense of hyper responsibility, and I know that happens with me, where you feel like you need to be able to take care of everyone and solve everyone's problems for them. That's one of the biggest challenges for me. Yeah, having my mom, who uh, I've almost lost 4 times, who's permanently disabled from a bicycle accident back in 1999, um, who is in constant pain. She can barely walk. Um, she can barely do anything. And it's such a helpless feeling to know that I can't do anything to help her. And then, as I said before, with my dad, when my dad was dying of cancer, I felt that sense of hyper responsibility, that it's my job to take care of my dad. It's my job to make sure that everything goes right, that my dad's comfortable, that my dad's happy. And people with scrupulosity end up taking on the burdens of everyone else around them because you want so much to be able to be helpful and not be a hindrance, because you know that your OCD is quite visible, and you don't want people to think that you're some kind of weird freak or something. I know that's what I've been called before, and it's a pretty awful feeling. With scrupulosity, um, probably the best thing to do is to pray and tell God that you know that He knows what's in your heart, and that you don't subscribe to those thoughts, that they're just the enemy's way of trying to separate you from God. And keep praying for strength. And it's a battle that will be fought every day, probably for the rest of your life. But it doesn't have to become your life. And that's the point that I'm at myself right now, is trying to not let it become my life, because to be 34 years old and to be on complete disability, not being able to work, not being able to do the things that I want to do, is an awful feeling. Um, Another thing I want to touch on briefly um, is that OCD itself often um, it has a spectrum of other disorders that include body dysmorphic disorder, which I admit I suffered from myself um, the summer of my freshman year in high school. Um, I had started seeing, on TV and in movies, guys my age having boyfriends, and I wondered why I didn't have a boyfriend. Was it because I was overweight? Was it because I was ugly? Was it because I was poor? So I went and I became anorexic, and I went from about 170 pounds to 128 pounds in less than 3 months, and I got really sick and started losing my hair, um, my skin and my eyes started turning yellow, and you could see every bone in my body, all my ribs, every vertebrae, all the bones in my my throat, my everything. It was awful. There's also a very um, difficult um, disorder called trichotillomania. Excuse me. And what that is a uh, compulsive hair pull, and a lot of times it's with young girls, or teenage girls, or young women who their OCD is to pull out their hair. And it might sound funny, but it's not. It's not funny at all. It is heartbreaking. I've seen so many TV shows where they interview these girls who have trichotillomania, and they're shunned. When people find out that they are half bald because they pull their own hair out, they don't want anything to do with them. And I think that's wrong. That's discrimination, plain and simple. And it's just wrong. Um, Skin picking is another thing. I I know that I do that too. My fingernails, because I have Tourette's syndrome. Um, I often I bite my nails, or I'll pick at my cuticles. I do the same with my toes, and it's I mean, there's so many things that can be attached to OCD. OCD very rarely is the only diagnosis. Uh, again, like I said before, me, I have OCD, OCPD, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and Tourette's syndrome. And to have all those things, to have all those things wrong, and to on top of that add being gay and not associating much with my family, um, it's a tough existence. It really is. But I just have to keep in mind that there's a reason. There's a reason for everything. There's a reason why I was put here on this earth. There's a reason why I have these disorders, and I'm hoping that I've found that reason by making these videos, so that people who are too afraid to go out and talk to somebody can see these videos and know that they're not alone, regardless of what it is that you have bipolar disorder, OCD, trichotillomania, depression, suicidal thoughts, body dysmorphic disorder, whatever it is, you're not alone. There are so many other people out there that go through the same thing that you go through. And you have to remind yourself that you're worth trying to find help. You're worth trying to get in touch with other people that go through what you go through. And it's not easy. It's not easy because you have to let yourself become vulnerable. Whether it's seeing a doctor or going to a support group or whatever, you have to let yourself become vulnerable. You have to let that guard down that we all put up, and you have to be completely honest. And it's tough, and it's a journey, and it's a long journey. It's a lifelong journey, but you can do it. And that's the same thing I have to tell myself, because there are days where I absolutely feel like I feel defeated. I feel just, I can't even find the words. I wake up, I lay in bed, and I just think to myself, I've got to go through another day of OCD. And I know I've mentioned this before, my biggest, excuse me, my biggest, my biggest compulsion is hurting myself, hitting myself. And it takes a lot just to sit here for 20 minutes making a video on YouTube and not be hitting myself. It's awful. I have bruises all over my body. Right now I have a huge bruise and bump on my right quadricep from constantly pounding my fist into it to try to short circuit that anxiety as soon as I get one of those disgusting thoughts. So just know, if you find this video, that you're not the only one that's fighting. I'm fighting too, and there are so many other people out there that are fighting. And it's important that everybody connect. It's important that we find each other and connect with each other through social media, YouTube, support groups, whatever means. Because I think that having somebody who understands what you go through is so important to not only your well-being, but towards making the first steps towards having a life where you're in control of these disorders and they don't control you. But anyways, that's it for tonight. Again, thanks for watching. Any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comments area, or you can look me up on Facebook. Just look for Eli Carbajal and search, and you can send me a private message, and I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody and answer any questions anybody has. Okay? Alright, everybody, thank you for listening and watching, and as always, please stay safe.